sit on this side.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Claire Coda, and I am the Secretary for the Executive Board for AMP, and it's an honor to have you all here today. And it is my great honor to get to introduce Dr. Chiu, or the Chiu. He's the producer for the Curbsiders. He's probably been in many of your ears over the years. For the Curbsiders podcast, he's also the co-founder of the now pediatric spin-off, the Cribsiders. He's also developed the podcast Everyday Medicine, which features his expertise on his fellow Ohio-based faculty and the Long COVID clinical podcast. He finished his medical school and Med-Peds residency at Indiana University and served for 4 years on active duty at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, founding his love there for medical education. He then joined the Ohio State University, and he's now the lead physician in internal medicine clinic at the Outpatient Care East, as well as the director for education for the Division of General Internal Medicine and the director for the program for digital scholarship, on top of all of his other endeavors. The Cribsiders as a podcast routinely ranks among Apple's top 10 podcasts in the U.S. with more than 10 million downloads per month. The Cribsiders was founded in the summer of 2020 and has since then grown to about 34,000 listeners per month. It's our great pleasure today to feature Dr. Chiu here as one of the most successful medical podcasters of our time. So thank you.
Wow. Wow, this is really exciting for me to be able to talk to you guys today. So I'm Chris Chiu. Most of my friends call me Chris, but other people call me the Chiu Man Chiu. So you can call me whatever you want when you see me. I'm just so honored to be able to speak to you today because you'll soon learn that I have a lot of imposter syndrome because it was a lot of trial and tribulation for me to become a Med-Peds physician. And even though I'm wearing a bow tie today, I still feel like I have a lot of imposter syndrome. And in fact, in my talk, I'll even talk a little bit about my history of how I got here and how it actually relates to digital scholarship. Almost 2 decades ago, I graduated from my Med-Peds program, and now, for someone who never thought he'd be a Med-Peds doc, is now here speaking at the first AMP meeting, and so I'm just so honored that I'm here today. So we'll start off with my conflicts of interest. I don't really have any financial or commercial conflicts of interest unless Panacea wants to sponsor me in the future. But I do have a significant stake in digital scholarship, which I will define in a little bit. I started off as a producer for the Curbsiders, and me and my Med-Peds colleague, Justin Burke, we decided we needed more pediatric stuff, so we spun off the Curbsiders. And since then, I've co-founded some other podcasts like Everyday Medicine and the Long COVID podcast. So before we deep dive the subject, we're going to do a little bit of story. A couple of weeks ago, most people know that there was a big match day, right? So it's sort of a scary time, it's a fun time, it's an exciting time, but it's also sort of a scary time for a lot of people. So during this time, some people get good news and some people get some bad news. And so I want to start off with a little bit of my story because I had a lot of bad news on my match day. So Monday, March 17th, 2008, this was my email on Monday. It was a really, really rough day. And back then we didn't have soap, we had the scramble, and I know we have many people here during that time who understand what the scramble was. And I got the notification that I'd have to scramble. And on Wednesday, Indiana University sort of cleared out all their admin offices and allowed all the medical students to just hang out in their offices, to use the fax machines and things like that. I spent all Wednesday sitting in this office, and I was sending out my CV again, my application, my letters of rec, and it was really difficult because I wasn't applying Med-Peds too, so that's a big thing. It was a different specialty, and I was applying to these programs that had unfilled spots, but they were also programs that I had applied to and interviewed at, so obviously it meant that they probably didn't rank me. So come like 5 o'clock that evening, Dean Craig Brader, I don't know if anyone knows Craig Brader, but he was my dean. He knocks on the admin office door and he's like, "Chris, how are things going?" And I'm like, "Really bad, like really, really bad." And so we talked, and he's like, "Have you thought about family medicine and things like that?" And I was like, I really do love like the breadth of treatment of babies to adults to geriatrics and things like that. And he was like, I have an idea. I want you to meet someone. So I packed up my stuff. We walked across from the admin offices to Raleigh Children's Hospital where our Med-Peds program was housed, the administration offices. We walked up to the floor and I met Alex Drusic, who was the PD at the time, the late, great Alex DJ. And Alex was there, he was sitting there. He looked really frazzled. It was like one of his first, maybe 1 or 2 years as a PD. And they had an unfilled spot as well. And he was sitting there. I don't know if anyone remembers Alex, but he always had a lanyard with a USB thing just stuck in his pocket like this, and always Alex. And he was like, all right, so what's going on? And sort of Craig Bader sort of discussed with him, said, hey, I have Chris here. He seems like a good guy. Do you want to talk? So we walked over into the Med-Peds conference room, and we sat and we talked. And Alex was like, hey, Chris, I don't think we've ever met. So you want one of my positions? And I was like, well, I was talking to Dr. Brader, and we talked about what I wanted out of medicine, sort of the things I was looking at. And so DJ opened up my application, was looking through. And the funny thing about DJ was like his wife was an EM doc, and actually that was the specialty I was trying to get into. And so all my letters of recommendation were from EM docs that he knew. They were all friends of his. So as he was flipping through, he was like, I knew each and every one of these letter writers, and they all vouch for you. What do you know about Med-Peds and our Med-Peds program? And I was like, well, I was in the PICU, I was in the MICU, I was in medicine, and honestly, my favorite residents were always Med-Peds physicians on there. So I was like, I know that Med-Peds physicians are smart, they're intelligent, they think outside the box all the time. And he was like, all right, well, what do you know about our program? Outside of that, I was like, not much. So he pulls out his laptop, he opens it up, he goes to the Med-Peds webpage for IU. He opens it up and he said, I'll be back in 15 minutes. So I spent 15 minutes looking at the IU Med-Peds residency site. After 15 minutes, he walks back and DJ's like, so Chris, what are your thoughts? I was like, seems pretty awesome to me. And he told me, I spent all day talking to people, just BSing online, people calling me, I'm just looking at their applications and I'm just not feeling anything from any of them. But just in this hour I've talked to you, I've felt more honesty than I've ever felt before. And the people that vouch for you, I know very well. I want to give you that spot. And so I said yes, and then we cried together. And so that is my story, how I ended up being Med-Peds. I do, Amy back there sort of was in my class. And come match day, we all announced where we're going to be. And throughout my 4 years as a Med-Peds resident, I didn't know who knew that I was sort of the loser who scrambled into the spot. I always had imposter syndrome, and it was sort of like my little tiny secret that I never told anyone. That was all the way until 2019. I put the kids to bed and I was scrolling on Twitter back when Twitter was not a dumpster fire. And the Surgeon General at the time, that was Jerome Adams, he posted congrats to the people who had matched, but also sort of, tried to help people with those who didn't match. And for some reason at that time, 11 years later, I decided that I was going to tell my story on a public platform. So I posted my thread, and I had lots of engagement. And I don't know those in internal medicine if they know Avio Glacier over in OHSU, but for years afterwards, she would repost my original post the day after match day. And so I always had people reaching out to me and thanking me for being upfront about what happened, but also being able to see that I was able to be successful. And so that's sort of my story. The reason why I tell this is because people may not know this, but this is what I consider digital scholarship. It's one of many aspects of digital scholarship, and I'm going to talk about some more examples of that. But hopefully after we're done with this discussion, you'll have a better understanding of what I mean when I say digital scholarship and how it may relate to you. So this is my agenda for today. We're first going to talk about what exactly are the terms of digital scholarship, and sort of examples of digital scholarship after that, but also sort of the pitfalls and critiques of digital scholarship as it stands right now, but then how it applies to you, how you can add to digital scholarly works, and If you're in sort of that career path, how it may help you with promotion. And then we're going to have lots of time for Q&A because I always have lots of Q&A on this. You may see as I talk about this more that COVID-19 sort of figures prominently as like a large shift in terms of digital education. You know, Tommy talked about his CME company and how, you know, COVID really impacted that. So it's a really important part. So you will hear me say COVID-19 multiple times in this talk. So I just want you to be aware of that. So no conversation of digital scholarly works can happen without FOAM. So FOAM stands for Free Open Access Medical Education. When you Google FOAM, sometimes you get a lot of weird things. So when you're on social media, often we call it FOAMed, so that's the reason for that. So FOAM was coined in 2012 over a pint of Guinness by Mike Cadogan. So I don't know if you guys know this, but especially the digital scholarly spaces with podcasting, things like that, the EM folks were really ahead of their time in this. So a lot of EM podcasts, EM critical care podcasts, and so they were really in the forefront of looking at digital education. So what is FOAM? FOAM is a collection of resources, community, and an ethos. So it's agnostic of platform. It includes blogs, podcasts, tweets, online videos, all sorts of things. And FOAM shouldn't be thought of as a teaching philosophy or strategy, but more like a globally accessible adjunct to traditional education. So either it can be asynchronous or it can be inline, but it's still meant to be an adjunct and not to be a replacement for traditional scholarly works. So another term you're going to hear about is called online digital education. So I have my friends Adam Rodman and Shrey Trivedi. They work with the iMed initiative over at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, and they sort of coined the term online digital education. What is online digital education? So it's very similar to FOAM. It represents a significant paradigm shift in education, moving away from traditional structured teaching methods to more fluid, digitally driven interactions. The difference between FOAM and online digital education is the fact that ODE doesn't have to be free. You know, so FOAM has the word free in it. And so we all know that not every education can be free, but it's awesome if it is. So ODE really encompasses a wide array of platforms just like FOAM. Blogs, podcasts, social media, all those things are the same. So on the other hand, you know, it can also include broader range of topics and formats like educational formats that don't necessarily need to be free as we discussed. Oops, let's see, where am I going? Oh, there we go. So now I'm going to go talk about exactly what digital scholarship is. So whether you call it FOAM or organic digital education, these concepts are deeply intertwined with social media, because I'm going to talk about social media a lot in this talk. So they thrive in the space, but it's important to make that there's a clear distinction. So digital scholarship is not the same as the cat videos you see on TikTok. It's a completely different ballgame. So to frame our discussion, we'll talk with social networks as we know them. These are spaces where we broadcast our lives. You know, last night I went and I got affogato, is that what it's called? And it was amazing. I took a picture of it and I posted online. It was amazing. But, you know, social networks are all about me. This is me broadcasting myself on other places. I think within that, we start talking about our virtual communities. And so this is where the magic really happens. This is where communities shift the focus from me to a we. They revolve around shared goals and a collective purpose. Take, for instance, a vibrant discussion with hashtags like MedTwitter, or hashtag Women in Medicine, or hashtag Primary Care Chat. These communities or ideas flourish and connections deepen and collaboration really takes root. Within these communities, we see the emergence of digital scholarship, which is a new frontier for creating, sharing, and building knowledge. So this is what we sort of consider as digital scholarship. We don't exactly have a clear definition as of yet, but hopefully you have a better understanding of sort of what we talk about when we're looking at it. So over time, you know, as we've expanded our views on digital scholarship, looking at research, commentary, organizing instructional resources, I'm going to sort of explain a lot more. I'm going to show you much more examples, but it's not going to be all-encompassing a little bit. So social media platforms like X, or those who have moved on to Blue Sky or many other platforms out there, have really taken digital scholarship further, enabling sort of real-time content creation, dynamic, interactive discussions. And these platforms really help us connect experts, you know, worldwide. We facilitate collaborative conversations and makes digital scholarship an essential part of modern medicine and education. So Ernest Boyer's seminal model of scholarship, which he introduced in his 1990 report, Scholarship Reconsidered, really broadened the traditional view of academic scholarship to not only include scholarship of discovery, but scholarships of integration, application, and teaching. As we know, discovery is sort of original research, it advances knowledge, where we look at integration as synthesizing knowledge across topics in discipline and time. Application is the application of existing knowledge, and teaching is the dissemination of existing knowledge. This comprehensive framework has significantly influenced how academic contributions are evaluated, encouraging more inclusive understanding of scholarly works. Building upon Boyer's model, Hutchings and Schulman further refined the concept of scholarship of teaching, emphasizing that educational activities should be publicly accessible and open to peer critique and evaluation and reproducible by others in the field. These criteria are designed to ensure that educational scholarship meets rigorous academic standards and are akin to traditional research. In the context of digital scholarship, these foundational ideas are particularly pertinent. So digital platforms are inherently facilitate public accessibility and interactive tools. This broad dissemination aligns within Hutchings and Schulman's criteria, expanding the reach and impact of scholarly teaching beyond traditional classroom boundaries. Peer review in the digital realm adapts not only to traditional academic peer assessment, but also real-time feedback that we see within the global academic community through comments, revisions, and public discussions. This broader scope of review really helps quality and rigor in digital content. Finally, reproducibility of digital educational resources, whether through shared online modules, open access educational software, or publicly available teaching materials, really embodies the principle allowing others to use and build upon existing scholarly work. This not only enhances a collaborative nature of scholarship, but also aligns with Boyer's vision and dynamics of integrative approach to academia. By integrating Boyer's expansive view of scholarship with Hutchings and Schulman's criteria, digital scholarship can be robustly framed and evaluated within the modern academic promotion system, recognizing the unique contributions and challenges of digital educational formats. So hopefully I explained a little bit about what digital scholarship is. Next, we're going to talk about some examples of digital scholarship. Now just remember, this is not all-encompassing, but these are some of my favorite examples I like to bring up so people have a better understanding of what I'm talking about. So where are we now? Digital scholarly works is everywhere, and many of us are really trying to figure out where it is. Many journals have their own podcasts, their own social media presence, blogs. Our own communities, like the AMP community, has marketing departments with Instagram and Facebook and all these webinars that they're doing. So a lot of traditional media is trying to catch up to what digital scholarly works are doing. Here are some examples of the virtual communities I discussed earlier. Sort of on the left side are some of the traditional ones we see on Twitter. We've sort of branched out into Blue Sky and some other types of communities, such as #MedSky. On platforms like X, we have seen fun and collaborative discussions where we traditionally saw like in-person conferences like morning reports and journal clubs that now take place over multiple time zones and with collaborators all over the world. Now, this is the first time I'm going to bring up COVID-19. So, during COVID-19, there was, this huge crucible of us trying to broaden out what digital works can help us with. So NEFJC has their own COVID-19 page, and this was sort of a living resource for nephrologists as throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, new things were happening all the time, and trying to combat all the misinformation was really important for nephrologists. And honestly, it was a great resource that me, just as an internist and pediatrician, I could go to all the time. A similar resource was the Internet Book of Critical Care. Josh Farkas with IBCC, who's part of the EMCrit and the PoemCrit platform. With their Internet Book of Critical Care, they have a podcast, they have a blog page, but they also had this page on COVID-19 as they helped us try to manage our patients better, both in the ICU and in our step-down units. One of my favorite examples of this is the Nick Marks attempt to provide critical care one page at a time with the ICU one-pager. So I actually bookmarked quite a few of these at the beginning because, as many of us remember, we were forced to take care of some very sick patients inpatient, but I haven't done critical care since I was a resident. And getting sort of this remediation for how to manage an event, how to take care of fluids in different ways, and all the other new things we're doing with COVID-19, this was one of my favorite resources. In fact, I just looked at this resource on my flight out last week on how to do in-flight medical emergencies. Also, at the beginning of COVID-19 and that pandemic, our learners, medical students, residents, faced a lot of challenges in person, as a lot of in-person things came to a halt. So core educational activities like noon conferences, morning reports, they disappeared overnight. They left a gap that without many viable alternatives. In response, a lot of different clinical innovators, sort of led by Reza Manesh, Robbie Gaha, known for their Clinical Problem Solvers podcast, they stepped up. They began hosting regular morning report style presentations over Zoom. They drew hundreds and hundreds of students, residents, and even faculty eager to learn and teach. Their mission, as stated on their website, was to create a culture of compassion and community to disseminate and democratize the stories and science of diagnostic reasoning. Through their virtual morning report series, participants could either just sit back and observe, they could interact, participate in the chat, they could even volunteer to discuss the cases out loud. And for those who are unable to join live, they posted all these on their website as well for people to have asynchronous learning. In fact, the format got so popular, they had medical student-only sessions, so they were safe places away from faculty. To date, last time I checked, they have over 460 recorded sessions, and this was maybe like a year or so ago when I last did the count. So the success of Clinical Problem Solvers really has inspired the creation of several other virtual morning report platforms. So Unremarkable Labs from the legendary Uncle Bob Centaur and his team over at UAB, they present Unremarkable Labs to enhance clinical reasoning and patient care, and then they put their sessions on YouTube. Another standout for my pediatrics in the cause is Not Just Little Adults, which is like one of my favorite titles ever. Basically, their podcast was dedicated to pediatric clinical reasoning. And true to his name, it takes care of children. So with these educational innovations born out of the COVID-19 pandemic, they demonstrated how sort of communities came together to redefine learning and share knowledge in new, impactful ways. One example I like to bring up as well is Education Theory Made Practical, which is a mini-series from the Academic Life in Emergency Medicine. So ALIEM, these folks in emergency medicine, as I said, they've always been in the forefront of a lot of our digital scholarly works, and this is one of those examples of that. So ALIEM has a faculty incubator program, and they actually co-authored a primer on education theory. They took abstract thoughts of education to practical scenarios. And the primer is now 5 volumes long and it's for free on their website. Back in 2021, their first volume was all converted into a podcast series by Dr. Daniel Harper, and each chapter was about a 10 to 20 minute podcast. So I would encourage people to check that out. So I could sit here and I could talk about tons and tons of podcasts. I commute about an hour to work each way, so I have 2 hours every day, and I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts, so I can really recommend a lot of different podcasts. Probably many of these you might recognize, but I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about all of them. But while I have you here, I do want to highlight one podcast in particular. So I think hearing our voices as physicians and medical professionals has been incredibly important, especially over the past few years. This is where the nocturnists come in. So who are they? And more importantly, what are they? They describe on their websites that they are a medical storytelling, live show, and podcast where healthcare workers are free to pause and examine their inner landscapes. So created by Emily Silverman, the Nocturnists really reached profound heights during their 10-part audio documentary series, Stories from the Pandemic. This series was crafted over 700 audio diaries collected from healthcare workers during the early months of the pandemic between March and May of 2020. It became, as they describe, an outlet for self-expression, truth-telling, and community for healthcare workers. Listening to these stories was super cathartic for me, and they resonated deeply. Whether I was laughing or whether I was crying, I really felt seen as I listened to these episodes. I found a mutual understanding, a shared sense of struggle, and above all, community with these people. During such an isolating time, these stories reminded us, every one of us who listened, that we are not alone. So as the stories from the pandemic came to a close, the death of George Floyd happened in May of 2020. This really changed the national conversation in profound ways. In response, the Nocturnists sought to give voice to the experiences of Black healthcare workers. To achieve this, they partnered with Dr. Ashley McMullen and Dr. Kimberly Manning, who is Med-Peds, by the way, to create a series on Black voices in healthcare. This powerful series highlighted stories of Black pain, Black joy, and Black excellence in medicine, bring forward voices that are too often unheard. In many ways, this type of digital scholarship transcends pop entertainment and becomes a larger essential public dialogue, one that challenges societal norms and amplifies critical issues. This brings me to my next topic, advocacy. In the last few years, we've become increasingly aware of structural racism embedded within our healthcare systems, an issue that has existed for generations, but was really brought into sharper focus during the events of 2020. In response, grassroots digital scholarship movements emerged, harnessing the power of interconnected networks and shared expertise to educate, advocate, and provide lasting change. This movement showed how digital platforms could amplify voices, build awareness, and challenge the status quo in traditional methods often struggled to achieve. From webinars to podcasts to social media campaigns and collaborative projects, these efforts created spaces for healthcare professionals and public to confront uncomfortable truths and begin the work of dismantling systemic disparities and inequalities. Beyond just raising awareness, this digital advocacy provided a means of collective healing to give people tools to understand and process dual pandemics of 2020, the COVID-19 and the enduring impact of structural racism. These conversations were not just about addressing the present, but also reimagining a better, more equitable future for healthcare. So we've talked a little bit about what is digital scholarship. I provide some of my favorite examples of digital scholarly works. Now it's time to talk about some of the not so great stuff. What are some of the pitfalls and critiques of digital scholarly works? One of the most difficult questions that we have is answering the question, how do we measure the impact of digital scholarship in medical education? It's crucial to assess not only the popularity of these educational tools, but also their effectiveness in improving and learning practice. The Kirkpatrick model here offers a structured way to evaluate educational interventions from learner satisfaction to behavioral change and results. Let's take a look at the digital landscape. So platforms like podcasts have exploded in popularity, evidenced by massive download numbers from the curbsiders, or significant interactions we see in medical blogs and on Twitter feeds and on social media. You know, those who follow Paul Sachs and his infectious disease blog, or Joel Toth as he talks about Neff Madness, they can see there's engagement in the thousands, and which shows a high level of learner reaction, or level 1 on the Kirkpatrick model. But what about deeper impacts? A scoping review by my Cribsider co-founder, Justin Burke, tried to look at the number of studies that were done on these different parts of the Kirkpatrick model. As you can see, we have a lot of work that's been looked at for level 1, level 2, and level 3, but not much on level 4. So while many may appreciate accessibility and format podcasts, proving their effectiveness and improving knowledge, which is level 2, and changing behavior, level 3, in a scoping review, we found we didn't really have that much study to give examples for sort of level 4. These numbers reflect how many studies have examined these levels. And the review also noticed that although podcasts were well received and do support knowledge retention effectively, the evidence for actual behavior change in clinical practice is still emerging. A lot of these studies really rely on self-reported data. Few have moved on to assessing long-term impacts on systems and patient outcomes. You know, for example, the ongoing series many may know about Things We Do for No Reason in the Journal of Hospital Medicine. You know, those aim to change and challenge low-value care practices, but proving direct results is really challenging in these cases, in collaborative efforts to indicate promising direction toward real-world impact. So while digital scholarship like podcasts are popular and valued for their educational entertainment, we must really continue to push for robust evaluations, not only to assess the enjoyment of these processes, but also observe and measure the tangible challenges that they bring to medical practice. So going deep into sort of the challenges, you know, that we sort of talked about a little bit, we have, number one is audience needs. So it is crucial to ensure that digital content really meets the needs of our audience. While metrics like web hits, downloads, social media likes can provide some indication of popularity, they are indirect measures. They don't always tell us where we're effectively filling our knowledge gaps. Although surveys can help, replicating the intimate, responsive environment of, like, say, small classroom teaching online remains challenging. Optimal impact. Another major concern is ensuring that knowledge we share leads to positive outcomes. It is not just about dissemination, but about affecting change. How can we measure and maximize the impact of digital scholarship to ensure that it enhances clinical practice or educational methods? Next is our role in education. Like I discussed before, FOAM is meant to be an adjunct. So what is the exact role? How is it ideally used between digital tools in medical education? It's very complex. So although FOAM offers significant advantages, including asynchronous learning, it cannot replace all traditional methods. We really need to try to find that right balance and integration methods to complement and enhance each other. Last is peer review. So the quality of digital content is really a hot topic. Unlike traditional journals, digital platforms like podcasts, blogs, and social media aren't always typically subject to the same rigorous peer review processes. However, community feedback can play a very similar role. I don't know if people remember the Med Bikini scandal that happened a couple of years back, but basically it took a flawed peer-reviewed article and was able to retract it because of the amount of support from public critique. This example shows that even traditional peer review isn't always equate to good quality. In the digital space, many of us engage in peer review by collaborating with expert reviewers or obtaining CME accreditation from recognizing bodies like ACP. And these hopefully help us ensure content validity and quality. So addressing these changes, it requires us to continually adapt and refine our approaches to digital scholarship, ensuring not only reaches, but also resonates and positively impacts our medical communities. So we've talked about what is digital scholarship, some examples, pitfalls and critiques. Now I'm going to talk about how you can sort of contribute and how it can help you. So what is your role in all this? To highlight the paradigm shift in medical education, Dr. Drabi Geha, Reza Manesh, Dan Minter, and Gurpreet Dhaliwal, they argued that the COVID-19 pandemic not only presented challenges, but also accelerated the digital educational revolution. This necessitates a re-evaluation of the traditional roles of clinician educators and these digital tools. Firstly, we need to think of clinician educators as creators. We've witnessed a shift from traditional bedside teaching to leveraging platforms like X and Blue Sky, where educators can create tutorials, where they can concise educational threads, offer just-in-time learning directly to our smartphones. One of my favorite examples is my friend, Dr. Avi Cooper, and his colleague, Dr. Tony Brew. They masterfully use this medium to engage and educate on complex medical topics in digestible threads. The role is to challenge us to create impactful, accessible content that resonates across the digital classroom. Another type of way that a medical educator has been pulled into the digital revolution is educators as moderators. So digital platforms like Zoom have transformed how we conduct case-based presentations. We've already talked about virtual morning reports, how it can reach a global audience, but also allow a diverse exchange of ideas and expertise. They offer a real-time interaction that are enhanced by digital tools using polls and breakout rooms, each of which help us maintain dynamic interactive nature of clinical education. Lastly, we have educator as curator, and I feel that this is where majority of us live. Not all of us can write tutorials, not all of us can make podcasts, but this role involves guiding learners through the vast digital landscape to high-quality educational resources. Podcasts serve as a prime example. Not only are they portable but accessible, but also represent a significant portion to modern medical literature. Educators can curate, recommend podcasts that align with current educational topics, and make continuous learning and integrate it into the everyday practice. Avi Cooper and Tony Brew make the argument that their tutorials fulfill Hutchings and Schulman's criteria for scholarship of teaching, making them suitable for academic portfolios. These criteria include being publicly consumable, available for peer review and critique, and reproducible by other scholars. They suggest that the reach of their tutorials or its ability to attract viewership should be considered as a primary metric for evaluating its success and appropriateness for inclusion and promotion materials. Their paper also discusses the challenges of accurately measuring the impact of the tutorials. While Twitter provides data like impressions and engagements, these metrics do not necessarily reflect the educational quality or the depth of the audience engagement. Despite these challenges, the authors recommend the adoption of tutorial reach as a measure to guide inclusion of tutorials in academic portfolios, advocating for peer-reviewed tutorials to achieve wide dissemination as indicators of faculty members' expertise and contribution to medical education. In a similar plea, my friend Avi Glasser has spoken many times at many different conferences and posted about empowering folks to really embrace digital scholarly works and be proactive about placing them on their CV. So I want to share some pre-publication data on what we've looked at with our podcast. So again, my background is Justin Burke and I, Med-Peds. We started off as producers on the Curbsiders. When we realized that we needed to do more, we started the Curbsiders. So the Curbsiders have produced over 130 episodes and a total of 2.3 million downloads or listens. Recently, we conducted a survey aimed to evaluate how podcast guests perceive their participation that impacts academic advancement. Of the 109 expert guests that we polled, we had 53 guests respond at a 49% response rate. Majority of respondents were early career or mid-career, or in training, which was a total of 68%. The guests were from a variety of academic tracks, including clinical, medical educator, and research. 53% felt that podcasts were helpful in the promotion, ranking podcasts as being more helpful than other digital scholarship platforms, but a little less than publications or grand rounds or grants. 55% felt just for the Cribsiders that it helped further the career. In our qualitative feedback, it showed that guests beyond the Cribsiders, they thought that it helped showcase their expertise, help broaden their reach, and enhance their peer recognition among physicians both within and outside their home institutions. Additionally, some participants mentioned that their institutions did acknowledge digital media, such as podcasts, in promotion processes. However, they also highlighted the continued views that it may not be as equal to other traditional scholarly works, as only 12% of the guests listed it on their actual CV, and only 10 asked for their download data to be placed in their CV. So as I wrap up, I want to come back to the paper by Hussein et al. In the realm of academic promotion, recognizing the contributions of digital scholarship necessitates adapting traditional scholarly criteria to digital context. Traditional scholarship typically demands the creation of original content, rigorous peer review, and the ability to reproduce findings or analyses, ensuring academic integrity and contributions to the field. Digital scholarship, while emphasizing original content creation, extends into the digital sphere with specific criteria tailored to online environments. This includes not only ensuring the content can withstand peer scrutiny, but also leveraging metrics such as page views, downloads to demonstrate impact and reach. These metrics provide tangible evidence of educational value and audience engagement of digital works, which is crucial for academic recognition, but often absent from traditional formats. Furthermore, the reproducibility of digital content, akin to traditional scholarship, involves the ability for others to use, modify, and expand upon digital educational tools or resources under consistent conditions. This aspect of digital scholarship highlights its dynamic nature and the potential for ongoing collaboration and improvement within the academic community. Peer review in digital scholarship adapts to not include just formal academic reviews, but the broader community with feedback and mechanisms typical of digital platforms, such as real-time comments, shares, and public critiques. This form of review can provide immediate and diverse insights to scholarly work, offering more faceted evaluation than even some traditional peer review might afford. Lastly, documenting these activities in academic CV now requires a dedicated section for digital scholarship, underlying its importance and distinct nature. This not only adds in the recognition of such work during academic promotion, but also signifies a broader academic and professional communities that the evolving standards of scholarly contributions. So many P&T committees should critically appraise the quality and impact of digital scholarly work using specific validated tools. Applicants for appointment and promotion should highlight and prepare the digital scholarship to specifically address their quality, their impact, their breadth, and relevance. So my last point, I hope at this point I've convinced you the merits of digital scholarship and their importance in innovations in medical education. At this point, I hope I've revealed the important barriers to broad implementation and incorporation to traditional medical curricula. However, now we have multiple opportunities to learn about our learners and their learning. We hope that we have empowered you as frontline clinician educators to understand that creation and moderation is not the only way to contribute, but also you have tools to become an excellent curator as well. So the bottom line is, digital scholarship is not going anywhere. There are many tools at your disposal. It depends on your adoption, your thoughtful criticism, and your willingness to try new strategies to make something durable and useful. For us as teachers, the classroom is our lab, so go experiment. I'm open for questions. Hello?
So in order to use it in your academic CV, since so much of it is fluid and there's going to be impact, over a continuum over time, how often do you update it? And what are the metrics that are generally accepted? And how do you convince P&T traditional committees to forego their old ways or at least incorporate new ways into their old ways?
That's a lot of questions. I'll try to answer each of those. First we'll talk about the fluid nature of things. So on my CV, if you guys want to download my slides, I have all my links to all my references on there as well. In fact, I even put a link to my CV on there, which is a live document, so it gets updated all the time. It's a Google Doc, and actually for all my junior faculty, residents, and med students, this is what I do. I have the AAMC format on my CV is a Google Doc. I can update it anytime from anywhere. Many times I'm in the bathroom, I don't know. I was like, oh yeah, I did that talk. I'm just gonna at least put a note in my CV, then I can come back to it later when I do my interviews, I can always update it. So that's one hint from our mentorship standpoint. So I do list a lot of my digital stuff. For me personally, I can't list 109 podcasts on there, it looks really bad. It's just impossible to put it on there, but for each of our guests, if they only have 1 or 2 shows, definitely, and all of our shows have a citation on the webpage, and in fact, we all have PubMed IDs as well, so at least for the curbsiders. So you can definitely cite them on your CV. In terms of metrics, it's really important to understand which platform you're on. So for podcasts, we look, especially when you look at general media, popular culture, and stuff like that, they look at like 30-day downloads, 90-day downloads, because that's when things go right on the feed. They don't always apply to medical podcasts, because a lot of our medical podcasts are sort of evergreen. So if I do a core topic on hypertension, not everyone's going to download hypertension right away, but come July when every intern starts again, we get lots of downloads. So it can be difficult, but oftentimes like 90-day downloads tend to be a good indicator of this. So this is one reason, so I said like only 10% of our guests had requested these downloads. Every time I have a guest, now sometimes I have like these fantastic professors, so they don't need my little podcast, my stuff. But definitely some of our the junior faculty come as guests, we say, hey, if you're going up for associate professor or for professor anytime soon, I mean, I can get 18,000 downloads. That's bigger than a grand rounds, right? So I definitely tell people, when you're going up, just ask for the most up-to-date data at the time. For me personally, if I do any of that data, on my CV, I'll say, so many downloads, last updated, and I'll put a date on there. So it really depends on what platform you're looking at. So whether it's, now blogs are easy, so most web pages will have a counter on how many views they've been seen. And so it really depends on what platform you're looking at. YouTube videos, you can easily see, at least for now, like how many people have seen that, how many likes, and all this other stuff. With some of the, I showed earlier when I posted about my experience with Scramble, you could see how many encounters I had, how many interactions, how many likes. I mean, it was like over 390-some thousand interactions with that one post. So those are the types of things that I put on. Was there another question at the end?
Maybe.
Oh.
You said something about a PubMed number. How does that qualify for PubMed?
We submitted through, I think it was through Brown. Their library was we just had to do the paperwork, and you can get a PubMed number. So, yes.
So, when I think about social media, there's now traditional social media platforms like podcasts and even tweets. But are there certain platforms that if you are looking at just using this for academic credit, that you would avoid, or versus how would you use something like an Instagram or Instagram Reel, those other things? Because I'm seeing more of that come through a little bit more. It's tough because they're shorter, they're using short bursts, not really not the same capacity. But just like anything else, whenever we are using social media platforms change. Twitter's now considered an older platform in many cases. And so, medicine's hard to adapt, and there's going to need to be some there that can be slow to adapt, especially as platform change. Blue Sky is something that models are moving to, but it's still using old platform model, which is using text suites.
Right, so yeah, Blue Sky, they basically just want to be the Twitter that went away. So I think that's why a lot of people went to Blue Sky from Twitter. So how do you decide what platform, what's best for you? And I think the question is, what do you want to do? And who is your audience? So if you want to open up a dialogue, you don't want to do that on Instagram. I mean, you go to the comments on Instagram, you can't have like a long discussion on there. If you want a discussion, you start up, you have a blog where you have a comment section. You do it on Twitter or Blue Sky. If you and also people like to do their scholarly works in different ways. Like I said, you don't have to be a creator, but if you're a creator and you're great at writing, fantastic, right? I've been told I have a face for podcasting, so that's why I podcast. So I don't do a lot of video stuff, although I love editing videos. So it's really dependent on what you want to do, how do you want to put yourself out there, and the audience you're trying to get, and what you want to do with the audience. And all the different platforms out there, it's still a wild, wild west, right? So like many of us, like in the heyday in 2020, 2021, a lot of us were on Med-Twitter. It was an amazing time. Like I still have tons and tons of friends that I've interacted with and got together. That was like the beginning of the internal medicine pediatrics podcasting sort of space that we all started, and we all started interacting a lot on social media. But you know, no one really, I don't even remember the last time I opened up Twitter. But now, I didn't disclose this, but I'm like the Discord admin, if anyone knows what Discord is. I'm Discord admin for our Patreon for the Curbsiders, and that's been like a fantastic space. We had a meetup with our listeners yesterday, and just being able to go on there and talk to people. You know, I think that we had a big discussion just like last week on like, what's the half-life of different ARBs, and like how would we use that, and things like that. Like so, I've really had a lot of fun on Discord for that type of stuff, but you know, it really depends on what you want to do with it. And I think the bigger thing is whenever you choose a platform and you put time into that time in creation or curation, that should be put on your CV if you can put any metrics to it. And so, speaking to P&T committee, so you know, I'm on the P&T committee at Ohio State University for our Department of Internal Medicine, and definitely, so at our level of the department, we review people who are applying possibly for going up for promotion and their applications, and then they go from there to our like big, you know, university, you know, Ohio State University. And Ohio State University P&T is full of all these academics who only understand publishing and don't really understand these other things. So I think a lot of P&T committees really respond to numbers. You can't just be like, hey, I published a podcast, but you say, hey, I had 2.5 million listens. When was the last time you had someone publish like their article and that many people actually read it, you know? So that's sort of a difference there.
Do you have like favorite ways for incorporating individual scholarship into like your work with learners, like on rounds or in the clinic?
Yeah, so that's actually, you know, even though I'm a creator, actually where I have the most fun is the curation. So I consider myself an academic med-peds, so I precept in clinic, I precept categorical medicine, med-peds, and med-peds residents, and then I attend on inpatient medicine wards. And in all those scenarios, I do a lot of, you know, teaching, in-time teaching, you know, 5-minute clinical preceptor, all that type of stuff. But one of my favorite ways is after we have a discussion, actually I'm always constantly taking notes on the discussions I have. And at the end of the day or end of the week, I will collate the discussions we've had and I'll give them back resources and of things that we discuss. Now, because I'm in the podcasting space, I tend to recommend a lot of different podcasts. But what's great is because I've listened to them myself. I have assessed the importance and how good it is. And I know if I'm recommending this is how I practice, and this is what I believe is evidence-based. So, yes, I do recommend a lot of Curbsider podcasts, but also my friends over at Core IM. You know, I've definitely, you know, all sorts of, you know, I'll recommend like following Joel Toff on Twitter or his podcast, you know, Ivy Cooper and their clinical clinicians. Like I recommend all sorts of different sources, and where I think my residents really enjoy my teaching the most is when I curate things to give to them.
Hi, I'm Lexi, one
Hey.
of the residents at LSU. And I guess my question is for a lot of different podcasts, a lot will be like, oh, CME credits, that kind of thing. As far as listening to podcasts, when they say, you know, we offer CME credits, do you say like, I guess what's the rigor to be like CME qualified, or like, oh, I can automatically trust this, or there's certain things that you're like, oh, if it's not this, then maybe it shouldn't be. I guess kind of like you said, curating these podcasts, these different educational things. Like, what are standards and things that we should look for?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So back when the Curbsiders started back many years ago, one of the first things that we did was, they don't partner with ACP anymore, but they initially partnered with ACP, and ACP allowed CME for the Curbsiders. They have since expanded to a bunch of other podcasts like Core IM, Day Shift, and a bunch of other ones. We really, like I said before, in terms of peer review, like we were trying to establish that podcasting was like a reputable place to get learning. And I think one of the easier ways was to get CME accreditation. So obviously, CME, MOC, all this other stuff we're trying to get like for this conference. It's not easy. We left ACP because they could only provide ACP members CME. So we went to VCU Health. So for like the last maybe 4 or 5 years, we were VCU Health. And for a long time, until January 2024, they allowed free CME claiming for our podcasts. But they started charging, and then I was like $10 CME credit. I need to talk to Tommy to figure out how to get this cheaper, but so that's one of the things. So the CME accreditation is one thing, and I think it was one way for us to sort of establish that we provided reasonable education. When we were with ACP, actually, there was peer review of all our show notes at the time. So ACP would send our stuff out to Stanford, and there was a group of people at Stanford who would peer review our show notes before it went out. We don't currently do that with VCU Health, but obviously you still generate questions and things like that. So that's sort of, hopefully that answers a little bit of your question, but sort of that's the reason why many of us did that to begin with. Now the EM folks, they definitely have, they have a database that actually looks at each of their type of digital scholarly works and is able to rate it, because they also have parts to the residency graduation requirement on using different types of educational tools, including digital scholarship. So that's something that I would love to have developed in the pediatric internal medicine spaces, but we only have so much time, and so that's where we're at there. Yeah.
Chris, this was awesome. Thank you so much. I think this is the first time I've ever seen like truly like a lecture on like digital scholarship, and so it is amazing. I think one of the biggest questions I had is like, well, how do you grow? Like, so like you're starting, you're kind of like working on this. You're not sure if this is going to be something that can kind of like keep on going. But you're passionate about it. What advice would you give to someone if they're like in their first 6 months or first year about like how do they, what's the one quality they can kind of like take through and like kind of like keep on going at it?
Ooh. That's a really, really good question, because that's the same question a lot of like all these kids who want to become big YouTubers, they're trying to figure that out too, right? So, like I think for me, it was never about growing. So I have 2 podcasts, one that I'm associated with that is very, very big, the Curbsiders. The Curbsiders is not quite as big, but we co-founded it. We have over 100 episodes, 130 episodes. And for that is the consistency, putting out product that people can trust. I think the Curbsiders obviously rode the coattails on the Curbsiders, so that helped us all a lot. But I've done lots of other projects that no one's ever heard of. During early COVID, I had this YouTube channel called This Week in Med-Twitter, and literally every single week I recorded my favorite tweets. I had a guest come on a tweet that I loved on Twitter. We talked for like half an hour on the tweet that they produced, and then we talked about our favorite tweets. Of course, this was early COVID, so like no one was going to come into their appointments. I had loads of time in clinic, so I was like, what am I going to do with myself? But after I think I did 18 episodes, 18 straight weeks of doing this on YouTube, I was like, I got like 50 views altogether. It was fun. It was great learning. But these types of things, you can try, you can put it out. I think for me in the end, if I'm doing something that I love, I guess if I have 2 or 3 people who just learn something from it, that was probably worth it to me. So that's why I try not to I try to do it when I can, but I don't try to burn myself out on it. I think that's the big thing. So, these 2 other podcasts that I do, so Everyday Medicine, which is our division podcast to help me, that I started to help, elevate some of our, within my division. So it's probably like this around with other places too. We have a lot of clinicians, and they'll do lots of stuff, and they're really cool, they're very smart, they have great niches, but maybe they may produce like some QI project or something like that, but no one ever gets to hear how cool they are and what they do. So I wanted a podcast where, hey, did you just give a grand rounds or did you just give a noon lecture? You spent like hours putting that together. Let's sit down for 15 minutes and you just talk about that. And you get another thing on your CV. It looks great, looks great for your P&T committee. And I just have fun. And it's also another way for my division now, General Internal Medicine, which the section of Med-Peds is in our division of General Internal Medicine. We have like 90 faculty members. Not everyone knows each other. And then like the last 4 or 5 years, the amount of in-person division meetings we used to have had decreased significantly. Before, when we were smaller, I was always sitting next to new people all the time at my division meetings, and now I don't even know what the next person's doing. So that's the reason why I sort of made that, and it's super fun. I made it so that it's in person, so I actually have to travel to someone's clinic to talk to them. And then this long COVID podcast I have one of my colleagues, Andrew Seamus, he developed a long COVID clinic in my institution. And you know, I think a couple of years ago at the long COVID interest group, they had like tens of folks, and they stayed for hours talking after the interest group meeting. And like, we have to figure out how can we disseminate this information. So he came to me and was like, Chris, you know how to podcast? I was like, yeah, I know how to podcast. He's like, I need you to help me with this. And so we developed our long COVID clinical podcast. And actually, that's been the most successful podcast outside the Cribsiders that I've made. I mean, and a lot of lay people are listening to it too. So learning about long COVID, all the different things, the new treatments that are out there. So I do them because I have fun. It's my creative outlet because I like being a creator. But then for me, I self-identify as a medical educator. So that's where the curation makes me really happy, because I can talk about evidence-based medicine with my residents and then give them resources to enjoy. You know, they can read the show notes if they don't like listening to podcasts. They can peruse the infographics if they don't even have time to read the show notes. And I'm happy if they walk away with some sort of learning. Are we at time? All right, thanks guys.